we should begin with the good this evening, and we're going to talk about what it's not very often on these short sorts of shows that people give love to the kickers. I feel like they're the forgotten guy. You got the Pat McAfee's of this world who obviously are very big on the punters and the kickers, and they provide a lot of positive reinforcement for it. But I feel like the general John on the street, like us guys are, you don't hear enough about the kickers. So we're going to give the good section tonight to Jake Bates, who kicked the game-winning field goal for the Detroit Lions in their 26-23 win over the Houston Texans. The 25-year-old kicker who had made the 44-yard winning goal in Week 7 to beat the Vikings, has also did 2 field goals, which were 50-plus yards against the Houston Texans. And James, what a story this young man has. I don't know how much you've sort of researched into him since we sort of said was going to be a topic, because, kickers are kicker to some people. I mean, outside of the Tuckers of this world, a lot of them are with names, but, maybe people don't really know who they are, I suppose. Whereas this fine young gentleman is getting a lot of praise in the media in the last 24 hours. Well, now.
Yeah, massively so. And he's been rock solid all season. And yeah, really, really strange, unusual background and way into the NFL this time around. Started out playing soccer and, then made a switch to playing American football, but only kicked kickoffs for like a couple of years in college. His progression from there is, we've seen soccer players before. If you follow him on like Instagram or whatever else, like kicking 60 odd yarders and everything else, but like under absolutely no pressure, just on an empty field in perfect conditions and everything else. So a lot of soccer players obviously think that they've got this in the bag. Cut by the Texans as well. So obviously there's a little bit of retribution for him there this week, and obviously I don't think the Texans are going to say that they are like missing him or anything. They're not in a particularly bad kicker situation either, but made his name in the UFL, signed in December before the season started. He played for the Michigan Panthers, I believe they were called. And he was absolutely tearing it up in that league, multiple 60-yarders. And then he signed his contract with the Lions, but wasn't the number one guy. Michael Badgley was still there and then got an injury in preseason. So Bates won the sort of like internal competition that they had there. And apparently there was 77 UFL guys made on rosters in the preseason, and he is one of only 2 that made it. And I don't know the other guy's name. I'm really sorry to the other guy. But
what's really bad is I have that wrote down too, and I didn't write the name of him.
I feel really awful. But yeah, I mean, the Lions have come up as this really scrappy, like hit them hard, really sort of uppercut punch kind of team, and his story kind of fits in with the sort of vibe that they feel like they've got going on. This sort of scrappy guy who is saying himself like he was a brick salesman in Texas, in Houston, because after he got cut by the Texans, and he just sort of didn't know what to do with himself and thought football was done for, and now he's absolutely balling. And long may it continue. But the kicking game is the most fickle position on any NFL team. You've only got to miss 1 or 2 high profile ones and that can be you done. So obviously I'm sure he won't be resting on his laurels or anything like that, but he seems to be in the right place, the right kind of guy behind him. Coach wise, with Dan Campbell, just likes to big everyone up no matter who they are or where they've come from. In fact, I think he loves the guys who've got the scrappy story. Do you know what I mean? That they're his guys. They're the guys that he wants in his locker room, who are gonna, scrape and claw at every opportunity. So awesome for him. Love his story. There's a lot of good stories in the NFL, but this is definitely one of the better ones. And let's big up the kickers a little bit more often if we can. We're quick to criticize, but don't put the don't put the love on them as often as we should do. And these are guys that win massive games way more regularly than I think they're given credit for. So
he's in fact he's actually from I've probably not pronounced this correctly, from Tomball, Texas, which is actually northwest of Houston. So he's a local Houston kid as well. So kicking this winning field goal against his home team he probably supported as a child as well, is a pretty great thing. Yeah, he worked for Acme Bricks, which were a brick manufacturer.
That's a Warner Brothers company, surely.
Well, yeah, indeed. But that was like, whilst and he also attended Arkansas and then formerly of Texas State as well. He actually never attempted a field goal in college. Never kicked a field goal in college. And
it's insane.
And went to the UFL and made a 64-yard field goal. And that was the longest in UFL history and any predecessor league to that as well. So, guy can kick the ball. Let's be honest. I mean, and he's yet to miss his season, Johnny. Do you think we're going to get more as we progress with things like the player pathway? And Jordan Mailata, the left tackle at the Philadelphia Eagles, played rugby from Australia, obviously. We have our own pathway, and with the European guys as well as the international guys. Obviously, Lewis Rees-Zammit, the rugby players, coming this year. Obviously, he's on the practice squad at the Jags. Do you think that there may be a bit of a progression for potentially more people that are in one sport, or maybe that sport was what they were going to do and then went into the NFL? Because obviously, famously, we have like people like Kyler Murray, who was like slated to be like a number one draft pick in baseball, and then became the number one pick in the NFL, which a lot of Antonio Gates was like very, very close to being a high-end basketball player. Do you think we're going to see maybe more and more of that, especially with like soccer/football, with the the European pathway and the international pathway?
Yeah, I think we definitely.
Sorry to interrupt as well. With the Irish guy, we've seen a lot of the Irish guys being punters and everything like that in a minute, aren't we? As well.
Yeah, there's been I think about 3 or 4 in the last 12 months who have been either from an international background or from a previous sport background, and obviously kicking obviously soccer being a predominantly kicking sport, that's obviously going to help with the any sort of kicking sort of credentials in the NFL. And these guys are, I mean, kicking in general in the NFL is just if we look at it even 10-20 years ago, the difference in records consistently being challenged and broken. The 50-yarders nowadays are expected field goals, which is I think would have been unheard of 20 years ago. So yeah, I think we're gonna see more players, particularly in the kicking punting position. Obviously, historically, we've had the likes of Morten Anderson, Gary Anderson, the South African as well, and others. This is obviously the position that I think the talent is most resonates with other sports, football, rugby, obviously. But yeah, and it's a great story for Jay Bates, particularly his background and the adversity, I suppose, he's faced in his journey to the Lions. He stepped up when his team needed him most. Obviously, the Lions, that's the sign of a great team. Is when the Lions. If you look at obviously all the stats around Jared Goff and the yards against the Texans, they should have lost that game, and they had to rely on a very inexperienced but good kicker to bail them out. So yeah, all for Jay Bates, and I hope he continues to and has a very, very long and prosperous career in the NFL, because like James said, it's a position which likes to change. So yeah, it's a great moment for him, and I'm sure him, his family, and obviously the coaching staff. Obviously the game ball given to him, I think a couple of times now by Dan Campbell. It must be a really, really good thing for him and for the locker room.